Welcome to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. I am your host, Chad Hufford, and this is the podcast where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the working world. Each week, we dive into the incredible stories of honest, hardworking folks who have found financial success through grit, determination, and good old-fashioned elbow grease. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn how to turn your hard work into your own success story, you're in the right place. This is the Blue Collar Millionaire Show.
Logan, we're back here, another episode of the Blue Collar Millionaire Show, and we have been talking about this the concept of panic and dread and fear and just kind of the human emotions. But I want to switch gears a little bit and actually talk about what is the other side? What does resilience look like? We talked about grit and some of these other things, but we talked about the ingredients of dread, the ingredients of panic, not an exhaustive list, but panic would include feelings of entrapment, helplessness, isolation or disconnection. And then I want to kind of flip that, look at some of the opposites. And somebody who is resilient, they might bend, but they don't break. And Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he's an author, written actually some very fascinating books, but he has a concept of anti-fragility. Because you think resilience, a rubber ball is resilient. It can be compressed, misshapen, always comes back to its original form, which is good. But what if you come back even stronger, better? You come through that turmoil, you come through that difficulty even stronger than you were before. So it's beyond resilience. And in order to do that, we have to flip some of those, I think, panic elements on their head. So instead of entrapment, helplessness, isolation, there are ingredients or characteristics of people who typically display resilience. And before we get started on this, the thing I want to mention is resilience. It is like a muscle. It's not a genetic code thing where you have it or you don't. It's something that we can work on. Unfortunately, resilience usually gets stronger going through trials and tribulation.
Right.
Doesn't have to, but it's typically how it's exercised. But it is something that we can exercise. And you might look at this and say, well, man, I don't have a lot of resilience. And okay, that's fine. It's like walking to a gym, like, man, I can't do that. I can't lift it, but I can work towards it.
So go ahead and dive in. What are some of those ingredients, or what are some of those characteristics of resilience?
Well, I think number one is just a sense of agency. That there's a lot that I can't control, but there are things that I can control. There's aspects of my life that I can influence. We talked about that a little bit in a recent episode on lead measures, where you're connecting an outcome, like, you want to buy a house, or you're trying to graduate college, or something that is good and noble, but you can't just flip a switch and make it happen. In taking a goal, breaking it down by lead measures. What are the things that I can control? I can't control if I pass that test next week, but I can control if I study for an hour every night.
Right.
If I meet up with a friend and we create flashcards with all, So that's an example of taking a graduation or a test assignment, and I want to pass this into, okay, what are lead measures that I can control? I'm going to spend an hour reviewing my notes, whatever that thing is. But it's restoring a sense of control and agency, that there is something I can do about this situation I'm facing. So the opposite of that is, again, the sense of helplessness, maybe even learned helplessness, where you feel like you're a victim and you're focusing on everything you can't do, which oftentimes allows us to miss what we can to do. And we see this a lot in finances, where everybody is so focused on everything on the news that is completely out of our control. It's not meaningless. But like Dave Ramsey says, what you do in your house is more impactful to your life than what happens in the White House.
Yeah.
But that's what we focus on. We focus on politics and wars and macroeconomics, all these different things. And whether it's intentional or not, I think sometimes those things can be a cop-out. But whether it's intentional or not, we often miss opportunities to act on our lives because we're so busy reacting to the events around us.
And I'll just say, maybe it fits. Well, we'll just make it fit here as we're talking about agency. I'm sure there's other categories, but there tends to be two categories of people that I see a lot. And maybe I'm just seeing it through my lens because I am one category and my wife Carrie is a different category. She has a ton of resilience. She has a ton of grit. She is the type of person that she will just she worked on the engine to her Yukon. Never done it before, but she figured out how to work on it. YouTube, asking for help from her dad, who was a mechanic, a couple different things like that. But mostly it was just diving in and not being afraid to fail and screw it up, and she'll figure it out. I'm the opposite. My tendency is I'm afraid, I don't want to screw it up, so I'm just not even going to try it because I don't know how to do it. For me, part of agency is recognizing I can work on it, maybe in some small way. I can work on something. I will watch 2 YouTube videos or something. But for somebody that has a lot of natural resilience and maybe is born with a little bit of a different type of code, Carrie will tell you one of the things she has to do is be willing to ask for help. And that's really, really hard, I think, for somebody like her, who she's got all the grit in the world, but she'll tell you she's not good at asking for help. I might ask for help too much. Maybe I needed to just learn to do more on my own. So it's kind of a different conversation, but I feel like it kind of fits here because I think a lot of our clients, probably a lot of them are great self-starters and highly motivated. But I do wonder if some of those people maybe need to ask for help a little bit more sometimes.
Well, I think maybe that type of person who is gritty and self-deterministic, there's a term called, or this locus of control. Basically, do you focus on those things in your life where you can influence, or is your focus outside where you have an external locus of control? Like you're viewing everything through the eyes of what's happening to me rather than what can I do? But I think going back to our clients, the very fact that they're working with us, they've asked for help in a huge area. So I think a lot of the folks that Veritas works with, they actually have a really good balance of being a self-starter, being gritty, being resilient, but also being humble enough to know I need help in this area. Yeah. And I'm going to have some other people join me, which is, kind of flip side of what we talked about last time. One of the elements of panic is being alone and isolated. People who are resilient usually have community.
Right.
They have people around them. You're not always going to be at your best. You're not always going to be on your A game. When you're down, when you need a pick-me-up, to have people that are like-minded, on the same path, they have similar goals. They might even know your weaknesses, know when you might be more prone to needing a little pick-me-up, even if you haven't asked for help yet. I think having that community is huge. Resilient people might look like, we might see somebody and say, like, oh, they're self-made man, self-made woman, but there's usually a team of people behind them that have fed into that resilience. So I think that's another one that is easy to overlook, especially for people who might naturally be more mentally tough. Like, life will find a way to tear you down. Life will knock you down, but it's having people to help you get back up that's so crucial. So agency, super important. Believing you can't control everything, but you can control something. What is that?
Right.
Just, you mentioned the Yukon, like what is one small step I can take to kind of dive into that?
Yeah.
Having that community around you. Also people who believe that there's purpose in trials and difficulties. So I don't know what the best word to describe this, but it's people that can find meaning in turmoil.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, I think, that helplessness aspect. This is, you may not know why it's happening, but you're looking, or at least optimistic, and that's the word you use, right?
Yeah. It's a real optimism, not just sunshine and rainbows and everything's gonna be fine, but a real optimism of things can be better, and I have a stake in that, and I have a part to play in this.
Well, I think things can be better or will be better in the future is very different than, I think, the kind of Pollyanna optimism that some people have, where they think things should always get better.
Right.
And the metaphor I've used in the past is it's kind of like climbing a mountain. when you're climbing a mountain, from far away, it looks maybe like a nice steady climb, but typically you're crossing valleys. Sometimes you have to climb down to continue to climb up. So you're moving towards a goal. You're moving towards an outcome. And just like the agency, you're taking steps, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it's working. But every step is not going to be an obvious improvement from where you were.
Yeah.
You might lose some elevation before you gain. But we live in a world where people just want a staircase. I mean, really what they want is an escalator. They just want to stand there, push a button, and it takes them to where they want to go. But in reality, I mean, most people have a difficult time crossing those valleys in their life. And I mean, while we're on that metaphor of a mountain, the jagged peak, it looks a lot like a long-term return of an equity portfolio.
Right.
And so just turn it to investments. People who can find opportunity in the midst of obstacles can see that, okay, this is not comfortable. My life savings now has declined 20% through whatever the number is, but I can continue, I can ride this out. I still have time. I still have agency. I can buy some of the best companies in the world on sale. And there is potential even in the midst of this trial.
Yeah. And just maybe there's a brand new listener going, but wait, if they lost X amount of their, but as we always say, they didn't lose X amount of their life savings, right? They still own all of those shares and maybe plus more. It's just the temporary value, has declined a little bit. Just a quick aside, people who can find, meaningful purpose in the turmoil and trials of life, even just, and we've talked about this on some episodes, but even if you just didn't say anything after the word purpose, regardless of turmoil or trials, people have to be able to find purpose in life, because sadly, there are plenty of people out there that truly, they do not have purpose in life. They do not find purpose in life. Which is, as we talked about in an episode, it's really hard to work with somebody like that, because if there is no purpose in life, depending on how you define that, it's going to be really hard to ride out anything, let alone the portfolio going up and down and all that.
Well, especially if money has no purpose outside of money in itself.
Right.
If money is now the object rather than a tool to build a more abundant life, a tool to be a blessing to others, a tool to have more financial flexibility and freedom, a tool to be able to spend more time with whatever the thing is, spend more time with your family and friends. But if money becomes a focus, when that apple cart gets disrupted, which it will, it's harder to see that through to the other side.
Yeah.
Because that is now your focus. I mean, we've used this metaphor before of, your best body is on the other side of that treadmill kind of a thing, right? So if all you see is that torture device of this endless running, and you don't believe that there's something better on the other side of that, it's hard to see that thing through.
Yeah.
Because it kind of goes back to that learned helplessness, but there's no purpose. It's just, my lungs are burning, my legs are burning, this just sucks.
Yeah.
And there has to be a greater purpose on the other side of whatever that tool is, because that implement gets uncomfortable. It's designed to be that way. Investing is uncomfortable. I mean, even if the market's going up, you're still sacrificing something.
Yeah.
You have money that you could spend now that you're putting towards something. And if money is your sole objective, it's really hard to weather those storms.
Give me another ingredient or characteristic.
So it kind of along the same lines, but I think people who believe that there is something to learn and there's growth coming out of both good and bad experiences. So we talked last time about somebody who is panicked. There's a tendency to feel stuck. It could be physically, like the lady in the car with the spider. It could be stuck in a relationship. It could be stuck you've hit some sort of glass ceiling at work. There's a lot of ways people can feel that way. But I think somebody who believes that there's growth that can happen, there's something else that can be accomplished.
Yeah.
I think there's resilience there. Somebody who you might be a big fish in a small pond, but we'll just call it the Uncle Rico syndrome. I'm making this up a little bit as I go, but
Sure.
somebody who they peaked in high school and looking back like, man, if coach would have put me with on state, and that was the best time in their life 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That person feels stuck rather than a growth mindset that says good or bad experiences, whatever comes my way, those experiences are an experiment. Regardless of whether they end up the way that I wanted them to or not, and I'm just going to dip in and lean into my biochemistry background a little bit, but that was so good for me because what it taught me is this experiment is a learning choice if I make it. If I choose to pull data and information and experience out of that I can apply in the future, rather than, man, we just spent 2 weeks studying and planning, it didn't go the way we wanted to. Okay, so that can feel like a setback, but why not? And can we take the data that we have, can we take the experience that we just went through and transfer that into a future experiment, or maybe a new perspective going forward? But it's that, Carol Dweck calls it the growth mindset. Her book is called Grit. But it's the same idea. I mean, very closely related to what we're talking about. But it's, I think, the opposite of being stuck.
Yeah. Hey, as we've talked about kind of offline, we like a lot of what Jocko Willink does, right? And so often what he talks about is when they would prep for, a mission or anything. I mean, I don't know what the percentage would be, but the vast majority, maybe 90% of what they're doing to prep is literally just figuring out how they might fail, figuring out how things will go wrong. And in some cases, even making things go wrong in a somewhat controlled environment, so that they would be more ready. And I mean, that's a really, really extreme, wartime scenario. But that principle is exactly what we're talking about, right? Of just, and that's on if things go badly. Obviously, there's if things go well too. Hopefully, we're taking lessons from that. But you gave an example when we did 20 questions with Chad of kind of a horrific moment for you, but tearing your quad in track, and then just what has, and I don't know what that how quickly you took lessons from that versus kind of having a maybe kind of a grieving time, but that's pretty impactful, right? As opposed to literally you could have been Uncle Rico, man, you missed out. But I mean, you could have been that guy, right? It's like I could have done this, could have done that, and but it was injury, and that's why I didn't get successful.
When people who look at life, there's always an opportunity to get better. Like that does allow you to weather the bad circumstances and also make the most of good circumstances. Yeah. I like the example that you gave with Jocko Willink because, as he aged through that process, being a Navy SEAL is not a young man's game, but he had to learn to improve some of his other skills to make up for his physicality declining. At some point, you get to a point. I mean, you get to a point, if you've been in great shape your entire life, that will decline. Now, if you're 45, you've never worked out before, you start working out, yeah, you could be in a situation, I'm in better shape at 45 than you are at 25. If you're a Navy SEAL at 25, you're probably not going to be in better shape at 45. So he had to grow in other areas. So I think people who look at that and see that I can always show up as a better version of myself. And maybe some areas might decline, but I can make up for that in other areas. That's what I love about what we do, Logan, is we can always get better. And you meet people that might say that, they've got 20 years of experience in whatever industry, and you get talking to them, like, really, you've had 1 year of experience, you've just done it 20 times.
Right.
Because they've stayed in a little bit of a comfort zone, in that what you said about Jocko, like they push themselves to a failure point. Like, where do our skills start to break down? If we're in this situation in a firefighter and downrange, where will this plan fail? And it's uncomfortable and it's messy and it's not fun in the moment, but it allows people to continue to grow. There's no growth that happens in a comfort zone, but for people that are willing to either place themselves in difficult circumstances or weather difficult circumstances, realizing there's a better version of them on the other side of that.
So most of what we've talked about for the last few minutes on this characteristic or this ingredient of basically having a growth mindset, right? Most of it has been focused on, making sure that we can grow from what most people would see as a negative experience. But do you feel like, do a lot of people, or does a good chunk of people struggle to grow from positive experiences?
Yeah, I think almost nobody grows through positive experiences unless they're actively trying to. Like you mentioned the quad tear. When you said a horrific, my first thought was the carbon monoxide poisoning.
Okay.
Because that was, very similar. Like there was a grieving period. There was actually an anger period and things like that. But we sometimes, we can certainly go through tragedy and not grow.
Yeah.
But I think it forces us to make a choice. But I think for people who are going through good circumstances, the tendency, if we're not careful, is to let pleasant, good circumstances bring us to a comfort zone. And then that comfort usually turns to complacency, and then complacency usually leads to compromise. And I'm a sucker for alliteration, but that is the path.
Right.
So I think even when things are going great, to still challenge ourselves, being willing to do something difficult, to be uncomfortable, even if we don't have to, but also to be present and to not take those good times for granted, to always look at that next thing. I think there's a tendency for ambitious, hardworking people to miss the moment.
Yeah. Well, can I just nerd out on something just a little bit?
Yeah.
So this is, and I'm not going to try to quote it, but this is in Second Chronicles. This is a recovery lesson that I did for my guys several weeks ago, but I'll try to keep it concise here. But there's this example of, all these lists of kings, right? Of ancient Israel and Judah. And for the most part, they're not doing a good job. But every once in a while, there's a king who does do a lot of the right things. And the king, Asa, who does do a lot of the right things. And it lists all these things out. And most of it is getting rid of high places, getting rid of, idol worship, all these different things, getting rid of a lot of bad things. But then it makes a point in several verses to talk about, he doesn't stop there. It says there was a time of peace in the land. And honestly, when I was reading it for my guys, it for me, it like blew my mind because I'd never caught this before. It makes a point to list out, because there was peace in the land, this king, just made a proclamation and then followed through on that to basically like, hey, there's peace in the land, so I'm going to build up fortifications. I'm going to do all of these things to build and protect and be active. When he could have just been like, to stay with biblical terms, he could have done what Solomon did. He could have done what a lot of kings did, of things are good, we're happy, we're fat and happy kind of thing. Things are great. And he went out and took that time of peace. And again, if somebody, doesn't care about the Bible, like the principle applies. If things are going well, good, like take advantage of that time, right? And financial examples, obviously, if things are going well, what can we do to build our financial house, rather than just kind of sit on our laurels and go, hey, things are good, I'm happy, and I'm just going to kind of rest easy.
Well, and it's forcing, again, a little bit of sacrifice even when you don't need to.
Yeah.
And choosing to be less comfortable than you could. So, financial example would be, okay, you get a big raise. All right, I'm going to bolster the emergency fund a little bit. I'm going to pay down some debt. Like, you don't have to. You could spend all that and still be in the same financial situation that you were before, but just with more spending,
right?
Maybe more going out to eat or whatever the thing is, but choosing not that you can't enjoy those circumstances, but just to not get complacent and comfortable in those. There's actually biblical examples. Maybe we'll talk about this another time, another episode. But as the children of Israel are about to cross into the Jordan, and this is a group of people that spent generations in slavery, who they were stuck, they were helpless, they were isolated. And he's warning them that when you're in houses you did not build, when you're you're picking fruit from trees you didn't plant, when you're harvesting crops, you're in homes that you did, like when you're basically reaping the benefits from somebody else's sacrifice, that you're going to get complacent. You're going to forget who brought you here. And I think that can happen if we are not learning from even the good circumstances too. Like, reflect back. What are the difficult things you went through to get to where you are? Remembering the road that brought you here, because I think it helps us appreciate where we are. It keeps us grateful, keeps us grounded, keeps us humble. And I also think it reinforces these other elements of community, meaningful purpose, and agency. So those are the kind of the characteristics of resilience that I've seen. Obviously not an exhaustive list, but it allows people to go through both good and difficult circumstances, come out better and stronger on the other side.
Yeah. And just a very quick shameless plug, and I wasn't planning on doing this, but check out, I mean, I'll just give a short list of some specific episodes that touch on this, and real life examples from real people. I mean, check out the Dan Magone conversation, right? I actually have not been able to personally review the Kimberly episode, but I know she's got a lot of these characteristics, especially on the financial angle. You know, check out the Tim Tillman episode, and well, that's not just financial, but Tim Tillman, the Chris Tachi episode. I mean, there's plenty more, Cal Lowers, but these are real people that you can see in flesh and blood share a little slice of their life. And these are not principles that we lifted from a really, cool book on Amazon. Like, no, these are real principles that actually have been lived out many, many times. It's a beautiful thing.
No, it is. And you mentioned it not lifted out of a book on Amazon. It was 20 years of seeing these experiences that actually got me to write that chapter in that book on Amazon. Like, there's a chapter because I saw it. I saw these things being lived out. And the folks that we work with are, for the most part, I think, wonderful examples. They're illustrations of what resilience and grit look like.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for giving us half hour of your time, and be sure to check out next episode of the Blue Collar Millionaire Show.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Millionaire Show. We hope this episode has been inspiring and beneficial to you. If you want help on your journey to financial freedom, reach out to us at veritasalaska.com. We'd love to sit down over a cup of coffee with you, either here in our office or virtually, and get to know you and your needs. And though this podcast is free of charge, we do ask that you please do us two quick favors. If you enjoyed the episode, give our pod a great rating on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and also give us a follow on Instagram. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with gratitude and intentionality. God bless.